I still remember the sound of my mother-in-law's heels clicking against our hardwood floor as she approached my husband Mike. The dining room was filled with the aroma of the lasagna I'd spent hours preparing, hoping to finally win her approval. My stomach was doing flips. Morning sickness was brutal at 6 weeks, but I hadn't told anyone about the pregnancy yet. That's when everything changed. Janet, my mother-in-law, placed her hand on Mike's shoulder and leaned down, whispering something in his ear. I watched his face transform from relaxed to angry in seconds. The warm brown eyes I fell in love with turned cold as he looked at me. "Is this true?" he demanded, standing up so quickly that his chair scraped against the floor. "Have you been lying to me?" Before I could respond, his hand came out of nowhere. The slap was so hard it knocked me off balance. I stumbled, catching myself against the wall, my cheek burning. The room spun as tears filled my eyes. That's when it happened. The wave of nausea I'd been fighting all evening won. Right there in front of both of them, I threw up. Mike stepped back, disgusted, but then froze when he noticed something peculiar about my purse that had fallen open on the floor. A positive pregnancy test had slipped out. His face drained of color. "Sarah, are you—" He couldn't finish the sentence. I touched my stinging cheek, tears streaming down my face. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm pregnant. I was going to tell you tonight. That's why I made your favorite dinner." The silence in the room was deafening. Mike stared at the pregnancy test, then at his hand, the one he'd just used to strike his pregnant wife. Janet stood there, her perfectly painted red lips pressed into a thin line, but I could see the shock in her eyes too. "Oh my God," Mike breathed, his voice shaking. "Sarah, He reached for me, but I flinched away. The man who'd promised to love and protect me had just hit me while I was carrying his child. At that moment, watching my husband battle with the horror of what he'd done, I realized our lives would never be the same. The secret I'd wanted to share with Joy had come out in the worst possible way, and now I had to decide. Could I trust him again? Could I forgive him? More importantly, could I risk staying with someone who might hurt me and our baby? The sound of a door opening made us all jump. Emma, our next-door neighbor, stood in the doorway, concern written all over her face. "I heard shouting," she said, taking in the scene. My red cheek, Mike's guilty face, Janet's rigid posture. "Is everything okay?" Knew nothing was okay, and it wouldn't be for a long time. I remember the day I met Mike like it was yesterday. It was a Friday afternoon at Carter's coffee shop in downtown Austin. I was grading papers. Being a third-grade teacher means your weekends start with a stack of math worksheets and creative writing assignments. He accidentally spilled his coffee on my students' homework, and his frantic attempts to save the papers made me laugh. "I promise I'm not usually this clumsy," he said, desperately dabbing at the papers with napkins. "Please let me make it up to you. Coffee? Or maybe dinner?" That's how it started. Simple, sweet, and completely perfect. Mike was everything I dreamed of. Mike was everything I dreamed of. Mike was successful but humble, funny but responsible, and he looked at me like I was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. Our first year of marriage was beautiful. We bought a small house with a backyard, talked about having kids someday, and spent weekends making plans for our future. Then Janet moved in. "It's just temporary, honey," Mike assured me. "Mom's having a hard time with the divorce. She needs support right now." I wanted to be understanding. I did, but Janet had a way of making me feel small in my own home. Nothing I did was ever good enough. The house wasn't clean enough, my cooking wasn't up to her standards, and apparently, I wasn't taking good enough care of her precious son. "Mike works so hard," she'd say, watching me pack his lunch. "He needs more protein than that." When I was taking care of him, the changes in Mike were subtle at first. He started criticizing things he'd never noticed before. The way I folded his shirts, the food I cooked, how much time I spent talking to my sister on the phone. Each criticism was preceded by those private, whispered conversations with his mother, and together, they were made public. When I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks ago, I should have been overjoyed. Instead, I felt terrified. I hid the morning sickness, making excuses to rush to the bathroom at school. I kept crackers in my desk drawer and blamed my fatigue on end-of-semester stress. I wanted to tell Mike first, to have just one moment of joy between us, before Janet took over with her opinions on how I should handle my pregnancy. The night of the slap, I'd finally worked up the courage. I'd planned everything perfectly. Mike's favorite lasagna, his preferred wine, which I wouldn't be drinking, and even bought a little onesie to surprise him with. But Janae insisted on coming to dinner. "Family dinners are important," she said, inviting herself. I was in the kitchen, layering the pasta, when I overheard Janet on the phone. She's hiding something, I know it. I saw her running to the bathroom at odd hours, probably having an affair. My Mike deserves better than that tramp. My hands shook as I placed the lasagna in the oven. An affair? Is that what she whispered to Mike at dinner? Is that why he was so quick to believe the worst about me? Standing in our dining room now, with Emma witnessing the aftermath of what just happened, I felt the weight of every wrong assumption, every whispered lie, every moment I stayed quiet to keep the peace. My hand moved protectively to my stomach. The baby inside me deserved better than this. I deserved better than this. "Sarah," Mike stepped toward me again, his voice breaking. "Please, let me explain." But Emma had already wrapped her arm around my shoulders. "She's coming with me," she said firmly, "and you better not try to stop her." As Emma led me out of the house, I heard Janet's voice behind us. "Mike, darling, she's hysterical. You know how women get in her condition." The door closed behind us, muffling Janet's words, but the damage was already done. My perfect life had shattered in a single evening, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. The next few days at Emma's house were a blur of tears, nausea, and endless calls from Mike that I let go to voicemail. Emma, bless her heart, took care of everything. She went back to my house to get my clothes, called the school to request my sick days, and held my hair back during morning sickness. "Your house isn't a home anymore, Sarah," Emma said one morning, pushing a cup of ginger tea across her kitchen table. "I've watched things get worse over the past 6 months. We all have." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, remembering how things had changed since Janet moved in. It started with small things. She'd rearrange my kitchen while I was at work, claiming she was helping. She'd make comments about my weight, saying she was concerned about my health, but it was her influence on Mike that hurt the most. "Remember last month?" Emma asked gently, "when Mike skipped your sister's wedding because Janet said she was feeling too anxious to be alone?" I nodded, feeling the familiar ache in my chest. He didn't even question it, just called my sister and made excuses, while Janet smirked behind his back. The constant calls and texts from Mike played like a broken record. "I'm so sorry. Please come home. I'll make it right. I never meant to hurt you." But mixed in with his messages were Janet's. "You're tearing this family apart. Mike is devastated because of your dramatics. And a good wife would come home and work things out." 1 week after the incident, I had my first prenatal appointment. Emma came with me, holding my hand as the doctor confirmed I was 6 weeks along. The sound of my baby's heartbeat filled the room, strong and steady. Tears rolled down my cheeks, tears of joy mixed with sadness because Mike should have been here for this moment. Ever shared this time with my husband and Lily together. "Do you want me to record it?" Emma whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. That evening I sat on Emma's guest bed, staring at my phone. I had promised myself I wouldn't contact Mike, but hearing our baby's heartbeat changed something in me. With trembling fingers, I texted him the recording with a simple message, "Your child's heartbeat." His response was immediate. "Please, can we talk? In person? Without Mom?" I looked at my reflection in Emma's guest room mirror. The bruise on my cheek had faded to a yellowish green, but the fear in my eyes was still fresh. Could I face him? Should I? My phone buzzed again. This time it was Janet. "How dare you send that to him without discussing it with me first? I'm his mother. I should be involved in these decisions." Something snapped inside me. 3 years of keeping quiet, of trying to please her, of watching my husband slowly turn into her puppet. It all boiled over. I typed out a response I'd been holding back for years. "You are not involved in decisions about my baby. Never have been, never will be." I blocked her number before she could respond. Minutes later, Mike was calling. This time, I answered. "She's gone too far," he said before I could speak. "I heard her on the phone with her friends, bragging about how she'd saved me from your supposed affair. She made it all up, Sarah. And God, I believed her. I hit you because I believed her lies." His voice broke. I could hear him crying. "I need you to choose, Mike," I said. my voice stronger than I felt. Either your mother moves out, or I'm not coming back. And if I don't come back, I'll be talking to a lawyer about full custody. I won't raise our child in a home with violence. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he spoke. Can you meet me tomorrow? At Carter's coffee shop? Where did we first meet? Mom won't be there, I promise. I need to see you. I looked at my stomach, still flat but carrying our future. Okay, I whispered. Tomorrow at 2. But Mike, if she shows up, I'm done. Forever. She won't, he said firmly. I'm choosing you, Sarah. I should have chosen you all along. As I ended the call, I wasn't sure if I believed him, but for our baby's sake, I had to try. I rose from my seat and left my position beside Carol. I arrived at Carter's coffee shop 15 minutes early, my heart pounding. The familiar smell of coffee beans that usually brought comfort now made my stomach turn. I chose a table near the door, an easy escape route if needed. Emma was parked across the street, ready to help if things went wrong. The bell above the door chimed at exactly 2 o'clock. Mike walked in alone, just as promised. He looked terrible. Unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same blue button-down shirt he had on the night of the incident. My body tensed as he approached, but he stopped a few feet from the table, respecting my space. Can I sit? He asked softly. I nodded, watching as he sank into the chair across from me. His eyes fixed on my stomach, then darted away guiltily. I kicked her out, he said without preamble. Last night. She's staying at a hotel. I wrapped my hands around my untouched tea. Just like that? No, he admitted. She screamed, cried, and told me I was abandoning her, said I was choosing a... He swallowed hard. I can't even repeat what she called you, but I packed her bags myself, told her if she didn't leave, I'd call the police. A couple at the next table glanced our way. I lowered my voice. Why now, Mike? Why not after all the other times she hurt me? Because I became her. His voice cracked. When I hit you, I became everything I hated about her. Controlling. Violent, ready to believe the worst. He wiped his eyes roughly. The sound of your head hitting the wall keeps playing in my mind, and then seeing that pregnancy test, he choked back a sob. The barista called out someone's order, making me jump. Mike noticed and flinched at my reaction. I'm scared of you, I admitted quietly. Do you understand that? I'm carrying your child, and I'm scared of you. You should be, he whispered. What I did. There's no excuse. But Sarah, please believe me. It will never happen again. I'm starting therapy tomorrow. I've already had my first consultation. I need to understand why I let her control me, why I became this person I don't recognize. I took a shaky breath. I have conditions, Mike. Non-negotiable ones. He leaned forward. Anything? Janet never sets foot in our house again. No holidays, no visits, nothing. She gets no information about the baby. No photos, no updates, nothing. Done, he said, immediately. You continue therapy? We also do couples counseling. And if you ever raise a hand to me again, I'm gone. No discussions, no second chances. I'll press charges and file for full custody. Her fingers clenched into a fist. I understand. He reached for his phone, pulling up an email. I've already found a couples counselor. And he slid a business card across the table. This is my lawyer. I've asked her to draw up papers giving you full custody if I ever become violent again. One incident, that's all it would take. The papers are being prepared now. My hand trembled as I picked up the card. You're serious about this? I love you, Sarah. I love our baby. And I hate myself for what I did. He looked down at his hands. When I heard that heartbeat, I realized I was becoming the kind of father I never wanted to be. The kind that makes their child afraid. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken fears and hopes. Finally, I spoke. I'm not coming home today, I said. I need time. And we start couples counseling first. He nodded, relief visible on his face. Would it be okay if I came to the next doctor's appointment? For the first time since that horrible night, I felt a tiny spark of hope. Yes, I said. But Emma comes too. Of course, he agreed quickly. Whatever you need to feel safe. As we sat there, the afternoon light streaming through the coffee shop windows, I realized we were at a crossroads. The path forward would be hard, filled with counseling sessions and rebuilding trust. But at least now there was a path. The next 2 weeks were a strange dance of careful boundaries and small steps forward. Mike attended his therapy sessions twice a week, sending me photos of his check-ins at the therapist's office. Dr. Martinez, our couples counselor, helped us start rebuilding, mainly through supervised sessions where we learned to communicate without Janet's toxic influence. But Janet wasn't going quietly. "Mike, your mother's outside my classroom again," I texted him one Tuesday morning. Through the window, I could see her sitting in her silver Mercedes, watching the school entrance. My third graders were at recess, but my hands shook as I typed. His response was immediate. "Don't move. I'm calling the police." 15 minutes later, I watched through my classroom window as 2 police officers approached Janet's car. She played the perfect victim. Tears, trembling hands, just a concerned mother worried about her son's marriage. But when they told her to leave, her mask slipped. "She's poisoning my son against me," she screamed, loud enough that I could hear her through the closed windows. "She trapped him with that baby." My classroom aide, Susan, placed a protective hand on my shoulder. "Want me to film this?" she whispered. "Might be useful for that restraining order you mentioned." I nodded, grateful for her quick thinking. That evening, during our counseling session, Mike broke down when I showed him the video. "I never saw it before," he said, his voice hollow. "How she really is. She acted exactly like she did when Dad left, screaming, making accusations, playing the victim. And he looked at Dr. Martinez. "I always believed her version of everything." "The generational pattern of abuse is strong," Dr. Martinez said gently. "But Mike, you're breaking it. Every time you choose Sarah and your child over your mother's manipulation, you're breaking it." Later that week, we had another prenatal appointment. Emma drove me, with Mike following in his car, one of our new safety measures. The ultrasound technician pointed out our baby's tiny form on the screen, and for the first time since the incident, Mike reached for my hand. I let him take it. "Would you like to know the gender?" the technician asked. Mike looked at me questioningly. I nodded. "It's a girl," she smiled. A girl. My free hand went to my stomach protectively. Looking at Mike, I saw the same thought in his eyes. Our daughter would never know the pain of being afraid in her own home. That evening, as Emma and I were leaving the clinic, we found Janet waiting in the parking lot. Before I could react, Mike stepped between us. "Leave," he said firmly. "Now, or I'm calling the police again." "I have a right to know about my granddaughter." Janet's voice rose hysterically. She must have been listening through the clinic walls. "No, you don't." Mike's voice was steel. "You lost that right when you made me hurt her mother." Janet's face contorted. "I never made you do anything. She's turning you against me, just like your father." "Security is on their way," Emma interrupted, phone in hand. "And they've been instructed to call the police immediately." As security approached, Janet retreated to her car, but not before yelling, "This isn't over. That's my grandbaby." That night, in Emma's guest room, I finally let myself break down. Mike sat on the floor outside my door. We weren't ready for him to stay over yet, but he refused to leave me alone after Janet's appearance. "I've filed for the restraining order," he said through the door, "for all 3 of us. You, me, and the baby. My lawyer says with the school video and the clinic incident, we'll get it." I pressed my hand against the door. On the other side, I could hear him do the same. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything I put you through, for every time I didn't protect you, for every time I chose her." I know," I said softly. "But Mike, I need you to understand something. Anything. I'm not doing this for us. I'm doing it for her." I touched my growing belly. "She deserves better than what we had." "Yes," he agreed. "She does. And I swear, Sarah, she'll have it. We'll give her everything we never had. Safety, trust, love, without conditions." For the first time in weeks, I believed him. The restraining order came through a week later. 3 months, renewable based on behavior. Seeing it in writing, Janet Matthews must maintain a distance of at least 500 feet. Made it real. We were doing this. Mike and I continued our separate therapy sessions, meeting twice a week with Dr. Martinez for couples counseling. Slowly, painfully, we began to unpack years of manipulation and control. Tell me about the first time you noticed Janet's influence changing your behavior, Dr. Martinez asked Mike during one session. He rubbed his face, thinking. 2 months after our wedding. Sarah made this beautiful birthday dinner for me, but Mom had already surprised me with lunch. She knew about the dinner, Sarah had told her. When I got home, she started saying how worried she was about Sarah wasting money on expensive ingredients when she'd already fed me. And what did you do? Dr. Martinez prompted. He looked at me, shame in his eyes. I complained about the dinner, said we needed to be more careful with money. Sarah had spent her teaching salary on those ingredients. Sarah complained a lot, and I began to agree with her that David was not the type to make poor decisions like this. I remembered that night. I'd thrown the whole meal away, crying in the kitchen, while Mike and Janet watched TV in the living room. The old patterns run deep, Dr. Martinez explained. But recognition is the first step to change. By my 5th month, we felt ready for me to move back home. Emma helped me pack, still unsure. Are you certain about this? She asked, folding my maternity clothes. No, I admitted. But I need to try. For her. I touched my growing belly. The house felt different when I returned. Janet's things were gone. Her photos, her decorative plates, her passive-aggressive sticky notes about cleaning. Mike had repainted the walls in soft yellows and greens, colors we chose together for the nursery. I got rid of the dining room set, he said quietly. Bought a new one. I didn't want you to have to look at that table every day. The new table was round, warm oak instead of Janet's formal mahogany. No hierarchy, no head of the table where she used to hold court. Instead, we developed new routines. Mike would text before coming home, giving me time to prepare for his arrival. We cooked together instead of letting me handle all the meals. Every decision about the baby was made jointly, with no outside input. The first test came at 7 months. Janet sent a baby gift to my school, an expensive silver rattle with a note claiming that family heirlooms can't be kept away by restraining orders. Mike took it straight to our lawyer. She's testing boundaries, he said, making sure we know she's still watching. The rattle was returned through legal channels, with a warning about violating the restraining order. That night, Mike held me as I cried. What if she never stops? I whispered. What if our daughter has to grow up looking over her shoulder? Then we'll protect her, he said firmly. Every day, every time. I won't fail her like I failed you. Dr. Martinez helped us make a safety plan. Passwords for daycare pickup, security cameras for the house, a list of protected contacts who could help in emergencies. As my due date approached, we faced another challenge, the hospital birth plan. Janet had somehow discovered which hospital I'd registered at. We need to change hospitals, Mike said, showing me the message his mother had sent through his cousin. She's already trying to get information from the maternity ward. So we switched, registered under Emma's address, and made sure every hospital staff member knew about the restraining order. It felt extreme, but seeing Mike take these steps to protect us helped rebuild my trust in him. You're doing the work, Dr. Martinez said in one of our last sessions before my due date. Both of you. That's what matters. Looking around our reformed home, at the nursery we'd built together, at the man Mike was becoming without his mother's influence, I finally felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. Labor started at 2 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday. Mike called Emma first, then followed our practiced plan. Hospital bag, car seat ready, security cameras checked. No signs of Janet's Mercedes anywhere near our home. The delivery room was calm, nothing like the chaos I'd feared. Mike stayed by my head, holding my hand and whispering encouragement. Emma guarded the door, our self-appointed sentinel. After 12 hours of labor, our daughter Lily Grace entered the world, screaming her little lungs out. She is perfect, Mike whispered, tears streaming down his face. She looks just like you. As I held Lily for the first time, I studied her tiny features. My dark hair, Mike's nose, 10 perfect fingers and toes. She was everything we'd fought for, everything we'd protected. The first test came sooner than we expected. A flower delivery arrived at the hospital, addressed to my first granddaughter, Lily. Mike intercepted it before it reached our room. The card read, "Blood is thicker than water. She'll need her grandmother soon enough." Instead of hiding it from me, he showed me the card. No more secrets, he said, ripping it up. We handle everything together now. The hospital's security doubled their rounds. Emma's partner, Tom, a police officer, volunteered to stay outside our door during the night shift. We were surrounded by protection, by people who understood our need for safety. Coming home was different than I'd imagined during my pregnancy. Mike had installed new security cameras, changed all the locks, and even added extra lighting around the house. But inside, it was just us, our little family of 3. "Welcome home, Lily," I whispered, carrying her into the nursery we'd created together. The room felt like a sanctuary, painted in soft colors and filled with books and stuffed animals chosen by both of us. The first few weeks were a blur of midnight feedings and diaper changes. Mike took extended paternity leave, proving his commitment to being present for every moment. We developed our parenting style, free from Janet's critical voice. At Lily's 1-month checkup, our pediatrician smiled at us. "She's thriving," she said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." That evening, as we sat in the nursery, Lily sleeping peacefully in her crib, Mike took my hand. "I saw Mom today," he said quietly, "at the grocery store. I was getting more diapers." My heart stopped. "What happened?" She tried to approach me, asked about Lily. He squeezed my hand. I walked away, called security, followed our plan. I let out the breath I'd been holding. "And how do you feel?" "Sad," he admitted, "but certain. Our daughter will never know that kind of love, the kind that hurts, the kind that controls. She'll only know the real thing. The same is true." Looking down at our sleeping daughter, I knew he was right. The cycle was broken. Our home was filled with a different kind of love now, one that protected instead of controlled, that built up instead of torn down. Lily stirred in her sleep, making those tiny baby noises that melted our hearts. Mike and I sat there, watching her, our hands still linked. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For giving me a second chance. For showing me what a real family looks like. For her." I leaned against his shoulder, feeling truly safe for the first time in years. "We did it together," I said softly. "And we'll keep doing it. Every day. For her." Outside, the sun was setting on another day in our new life. A life we'd fought for. A life we'd continue to protect. A life where our daughter would grow up knowing only love and never fear. And that made every struggle, every tear, every hard decision worth it.